is a fucking diamond. Mark Steele is a little bit of a hero of mine, and you can all fuck off. If you don't like it, jog on.
What a beautiful day in London. And the sun shines on the righteous. And we are the righteous. We are sovereign. I want to show everybody something. So the criminals in Scotland, 6 a.m. to 6 at night. Wake up! These are Satanists! It's a Satanist agenda! The mask wearing, that's what the witches do! That's what Satanists do in the circle!
Yes!
It will not protect you from what's coming!
Mark Steele. His name has become almost synonymous with 5G conspiracy theories and anti-mask and anti-lockdown rumbles around the UK. You just can't scroll through many 5G videos before his bald head and inevitable sunglasses come looming out of the darkness to ask you for more money for his numerous legal cases. But who is Mark Steele? Well, according to the man himself, he's a businessman, an engineer, a weapons systems expert. He's the author of multiple patents, some of them military secrets. According to Mark, he's fighting against the corrupt city councillors in Gateshead, who he claims are trying to install a 5G kill grid hidden in the local lampposts. As bizarre as this sounds, for the last few years, it's looked as if his followers would simply never question this narrative, but recently it seems like the penny might have finally begun to drop. Perhaps I'm being a little premature here, but I think it's time to take a look at the rise and fall of Mark Steele. I think the beginning of Mark Steele, internet superstar, can be traced back to this Facebook post from Gateshead City Council, which is really ground zero for this whole thing. And make note, this post was made in 2018, long before any coronavirus or any 5G rollout in the UK. The Facebook post went viral because it contained a series of seemingly bizarre denials, including the council informing local residents that the streetlights in Gateshead will not give you cancer, the streetlights will not induce miscarriages in pregnant women or cause insomnia or nosebleeds, and they're not killing all the birds and insects. And Gateshead Council also insisted that they're not carrying out secret government trials in 5G technology via the streetlights. Now, despite this Facebook post, local news reported soon after that a man had scaled a lamppost and vandalised a streetlight in Gateshead because he was worried about it killing everyone. That man was not Mark Steele, it was Lee Garrett, or as many have come to know him, Garrett the Parrot. Garrett the Parrot is an anti-paedophile vigilante turned 5G activist turned politician. His story is pretty complicated, but the important thing to know is that the person that Garrett the Parrot is parroting is Mark Steele, of course. To cut a long story short, Lee's children had been suffering from nosebleeds, so like all good parents, he immediately turned to Facebook to ask if anyone else or their children were also suffering from nosebleeds. Now, given that nosebleeds are very common, especially in children and in adults who pick their noses, he had a very large response on Facebook. His post picked up a number of comments and shares in the local area, at which point Mark Steele became involved and essentially turned up to Lee's house with what Lee described as a pack of science. Now, there is no problem or incident too trivial or unlikely that Mark will not blame on 5G. If Mark Steele sees a dead bird or an ugly woman or even a nosebleed, you can be sure as hell that he'll tell you 5G caused it. So it was Mark who encouraged Lee up the lamppost to attack the imagined menace at the top of it. But things are only really getting started, because it was also around this time that Mark got into a shouting match with two local councillors who were leafleting in his area. Mark eventually accused these councillors of being murderers and baby killers because he thinks they're trying to install a 5G kill grid hidden in the lampposts. And the argument eventually found its way into court because the councillors claimed that they were intimidated or threatened by Mark's behaviour, although Mark claims they'd been sent there to provoke him into getting arrested. It seems that these court cases had something of a circus-like nature to them, and there are some choice quotes in the local papers. Apparently, one onlooker was told off after their mobile phone rang, playing Happy Birthday in the court, and then another person was warned that they could be kicked out after laughing at the ringtone. I mean, that is really funny though. Why would you want a ringtone that's only good once a year? And proceedings were kicked off by the revelation that Steele would defend himself following a meeting with his solicitor. As a way the case is going to be presented, I feel that I will have to withdraw, said Steele's solicitor, Mr. Wilson. Ultimately, Mark was cleared of the more serious charge of using threatening words and behaviour with intent to cause fear, but he was convicted on the lesser offence of using those words to cause harassment, alarm or distress. Mark was fined £180 and ordered to pay £300 in costs. Now, Gateshead Council weren't happy with a simple fine being imposed on Mark, and they sought a pretty strict injunction to prevent Mark spreading more rumours about 5G. The injunction was granted on an interim basis and even limited what Mark could post on Facebook. But when it came back to court again, the interim order was watered down. This is the case that Mark often claims to have won, as if the judge recognised him as an expert, vindicated his beliefs about 5G, and released him from court as a free man. Here's Mark screaming about it on stage.
I want a court case where the council, criminals at Gateshead Council, try to gag me from telling people that 5G is a weapon. The judge, Recorder Nolan, said I was an expert. The council, there's been no debate. What he said was, this is a democracy. The public have a right to know.
But Mark still had to pay the fine for threatening the councillors, and he still left that court with an injunction. Here's what the judge said. I'm not going to give you a gagging order, I'm just going to ask you to behave yourself. But the judge didn't really ask, he told Mark. Here's the injunction, and Mark Steele was spoken to like a child by that judge, so it always makes me laugh when he claims that this was his great legal victory. He's still down a few £100, he still has a conviction, and there are things that I can do in Gateshead that Mark Steele can't, so in my eyes that's not really a victory, it's a defeat that wasn't quite as bad as it seemed in the first place. Mark often repeats that the judge said the public have the right to know, and I don't disagree with the judge. The public do have the right to know about the debate, and that's the part that Mark always misses. Our legal system values freedom of speech even for lunatics, and Mark being granted permission to talk rubbish isn't evidence that the judge agreed with him at all. Maybe the judge just thought everyone had the right to know how much of a nutjob Mark is. And at this point you might be asking yourself, well, why did the council push this so far? Why are they so scared of Mark Steele that they wanted an injunction against him? Well, how about we watch a video of Mark serving a bogus legal document to Gateshead Council around this time.
Get them down here and get them served with this document. It's a legal document. Well, why? What the fright of?
I don't want to receive it.
This is Gateshead Council hiding behind the council. This is them hiding.
Okay, so why is Mark wearing two pairs of sunglasses here? He's got one over his head and a pair on his eyes as well.
Right, this is unbelievable. This is a local authority paid for, ratepayers paid for this to cover up. They're frightened to come down and accept a legal document, to receive a legal document, right? They won't receive it. So they can see it's been disappeared. This is Gateshead Council acting illegally and unlawfully once again. Covering up absolute crime. Right? That is a legal document and they're obliged to accept it.
Now, as an employer, obviously Gateshead Council has a responsibility to protect their employees from this kind of thing. No one should have to tolerate this kind of aggro at work. And so you can see the kind of guy Mark Steele is. And the thing is, Mark is not just a figure of fun. It's been pretty well publicised by now, but some people might still be surprised to know that in the early 90s, Mark shot a girl in the head in a supposed act of bravado. Mark was roaming the streets of Gateshead with a loaded semi-automatic pistol, and he intervened intervened in a dispute that he had nothing to do with, discharged a firearm, and left a young woman with lifelong injuries. Look, in the UK there are very few people who've ever held a gun, let alone shot and nearly killed someone, so when a man with an admitted itchy trigger finger storms into a building wielding documents and screaming genocide, that is a cause for concern, and I understand why Gateshead Council asked for this injunction. When Mark calls someone a baby killer, you should remember that he's literally shot people for less. And if Mark ever feels hard done by when he's handled by the police, perhaps he should think about why that is. But how is he treated by the police? Well, here's a comical video of him refusing to give his ID because he needs to buy an ice cream, and then crying assault when he's touched lightly on the arm.
This is my fare, man. We get you by an ice cream.
However, we need
and then we'll go and take some details from you. Okay. Obviously, failure to provide those details may liable you, because obviously that may liable you to be arrested.
Ice cream, Fred.
What, sorry?
An ice cream. Do you want one?
I'll have it, just a drink. Can of Coke or something?
I don't have drinks.
No drinks, just get an ice cream then.
I've only got fruit.
It's because of the ice cream, that'll do it. Yeah, no,
Right.
I'll not obstruct you.
Oh! Yeah. I'm just going over. No. Listen. Whoa.
That's assault.
No, it isn't. Listen.
Assaultness.
Listen. At the moment, I need your details, otherwise you're arrested. Otherwise you're going to get arrested.
I'll give you details.
Well, come on then. Let's go and do it. Listen, you're walking away from me when I'm trying to deal with an offence.
So we've seen Mark accusing Gateshead Council of running scared when he stormed into their building and crying assault when he's touched on the arm by a police officer, but how does Mark behave on the receiving end of legal documents?
Right, this is a police officer who's arrived with a council officer, right, to serve papers on me, right? I've told them, I'm telling you now, I've taken legal advice, they can put it in the paper. I'm not accepting the document. I could have Novichok, it could have, for all I know, weapons grade anthrax. Yous have acted illegally, right? These councillors have acted illegally. They've rolled out a technology on top of the people that is an offence. It's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity. I've taken legal advice. Right? There they go. I've taken legal advice. Right?
Oh, so Gateshead councillor running scared when a convicted gunman walks into their building screaming genocide, but Mark won't take a piece of paper off this messenger because he thinks Gateshead Council might have a secretive stock of offensive chemical or biological weapons. Okay. So look, this shooting incident is certainly shocking, but I don't want to focus too much on Mark's past. After his stretch in prison, it seems like he's been up to mostly legitimate things, and I think it's worth touching on his engineering and inventing career because it's certainly something he leans on heavily to promote himself as an expert. You often see him recording videos from his office or carrying around his legal documents in his company-branded boxes, or talking about his company in his 5G presentations. So what we do know is that Mark is involved with the company Reevu. They sell motorcycle helmets that reflect the road behind you. There's a few different entities on Companies House associated with Reevu, and Mark was a director of the now defunct Reevu UK Limited. And you can see some of the patent records online. Mark's an author on one of these patents, but it doesn't seem like he was the main inventor of the technology. Articles online seem to credit that to Billy Morgan or maybe Mark's brother, Graham Steele. Whatever the case, Reevu isn't a wildly successful company, and even though Mark calls himself the Chief Technology Officer, it doesn't seem that Reevu actually has any production facilities or does any research or development. They have a patent and presumably a design, and the production of the helmet is licensed out abroad. And from their company records and various other documents, it seems like they've been sitting on about the same amount of assets over the last 10 years or so, and probably making a commission on the helmet sales. Mark actually stated in one of his court cases that he works 2 days a week and makes just £5,000 a year, so it's not a lucrative business. And you can see from a few other documents and news reports online that Mark and his brother have been trying to expand their company but have felt frustrated by government rules and regulations, and I think this might be a clue as to what started Mark Steele's animosity towards the council. It seems like Reevu have applied for but not always been successful in winning grant funding for their company, and all this is to say that Mark may well call himself a Chief Technology Officer, and I suppose since that is his own company, he is at liberty to set his own job title, but his day-to-day isn't going to look like any Chief Technology Officer in a company with, like, more than 2 employees, and that status doesn't qualify him as being an expert in anything other than maybe the production and distribution of helmets with reflective parts in them. And there's a couple more things we need to talk about to cover the full spectrum of Mark Steele. Now, one of those is the political party Save Us Now. This is Mark and his brother Graham Steele's political party dedicated to, well, I don't know what exactly. Wealth inequality, corruption, the NHS, community, 5G, of course. Well, what does Mark say?
Right, I want people to understand this. Right, our job is to save others. It's not about saving us. Save Us Now, right, is about saving others. Because that is the prophecy. Save others. It doesn't matter how we get to that goal. We are the truth. We are the light.
So Save Us Now is a real party registered with the Electoral Commission. You can become a member or make a donation. Garrett the Parrot seems quite closely involved with Save Us Now, and at some point in the past he really did run to be his local MP, but apparently at that time he was technically an independent. I'm not totally sure why. And we can see from the results of the 2019 general election that Lee Garrett got, I think, 76 votes out of 45,000 in his constituency, and he finished behind the Space Navy's party. So I think that can give you a rough idea of the electoral ambitions of Save Us Now. Another thing that I would be remiss to exclude would be the legal funds. Currently, Mark has 2 fundraisers on crowd justice. The first one is titled Let Justice Be Done Though the Heavens Fall, and is concerned with his attempt to bring a test case against Gateshead Council regarding their supposed installation of 5G in lampposts. This fundraiser has been repeatedly stretched over the last 2 years and now stands at £30,000. But all that seems to have happened so far is that Mark stormed into the council and handed over some meaningless legal papers. Mark has a second legal fundraiser titled Let Justice Be Done Though the Heavens Fall Part 2, and Mark says that he needs funds to challenge the authorities in the validity of the coronavirus regulations in the courts and to fight the legality and the necessity of the planned mass mandatory vaccinations and illegal actions to use contaminated tests to establish an illegal regime to administer contaminated mass vaccinations. This isn't a serious legal case, but Mark's raised another few £1,000s for it. There's something quite odd about these fundraisers because Mark has nominated a barrister for both of these legal funds to be paid to. Now, I'm not an expert in law, but this seems like a bit of a senseless move. The role of the barrister, as I understand it, is to advocate for their client in court. The type of cases that Mark is trying to bring here would really require a solicitor who might then consider instructing a barrister on Mark's behalf. Perhaps this is the reason that Mark stormed into Gateshead Council. He doesn't have a solicitor to do the research and administrative work for him. And his cases aren't going anywhere. He's raised nearly £40,000, and what does he have to show for it? Well, nothing. If I was someone who donated money to Mark's legal cases, I'd want to know, what work has been done by the barrister to progress Mark's stated goals? It's a lot of money, so where is it? In whose bank account? Who's spent it? On what? Why does Mark keep stretching these goals when nothing has happened? That should be the very minimum that Mark owes his funders, but apparently stupid people will give money hand over fist for these kind of platitudes about suing the authorities. So that pretty much covers the history of Mark Steele, and now you might be wondering, well, what the hell does any of this have to do with coronavirus? And the answer is, well, nothing really. It's just a trend that Mark jumped on. If you ever listen to him talk, he just connects different concepts without any clear reason.
Let's have a look at the genocidal plan. I'm going to show you some things in here. They don't like this either. All right, they don't like this. They don't like they don't like that. They don't like this patent to the coronavirus patent, obviously man-made. Don't like that at all. They don't like this either. The dangerous health effects of 5G under real-life conditions, how lethal it actually is. They don't like that science either. Don't like the science, don't like the technicalities, all getting a bit upset with it. They don't like people to understand that actually 5G is a direct energy weapon, and causes a number of significant problems, health problems. You see that file there, genocide plan. That's why I file it the genocide plan. Let's just confirm
some of the signs. All right, there you go. That's 5G. There's the pentagram. Got that? 5 eyes. You understand what I'm talking about. You know now who you're working for, don't you? Well, unfortunately, as the prophecy states quite clearly, you're all in a bit of trouble.
Hold on, which prophecy is that now? It doesn't sound so bad. And I mean, this is just classic conspiracy theory logic. You take any number of unconnected topics and just daisy chain them together into some poorly defined threat or scheme. What did all those things have in common? Well, I guess they were all in the same folder on Mark's laptop, so that's something at least. I was more interested in the file Jews.jpg. I couldn't quite make out what that image was. So the last thing we really need to talk about here is Mark's supposed status as a weapons systems expert. It's really what seems to get him so much attention at these marches and protests.
Now I'm going to introduce Mark Steele, weapons expert. Let's hear it. He was my Mackenzie. I trust him with my life.
So Mark Steele, our weapons expert, is going to take the floor. Mark, do you need a microphone in your hand?
First, I think it's worth taking note that Mark's never explained from where this expert status is derived. He doesn't seem to have any particular education or qualifications. He's never told anyone what weapon systems he's worked on. He's never said where he's worked. There really isn't much space in his timeline for Mark to have held any significant positions in any weapons systems companies. Reevu's been scraping along for a few years now, and Mark was in prison in the 90s, and before that he was working as a bouncer and a fitter. But Mark says he's been developing weapon systems for 35 years. Like when? The closest he ever comes to talking about this is his involvement with heads-up displays, but that's not really a weapons system. In fact, the few references I've seen point towards thermal imaging helmets for firefighters. Of course, Mark explains away this lack of clarity by implying that he's somehow bound to secrecy. He says that his patents aren't public, but if he has so many successful patents, why does he earn just £5,000 a year? Mark claiming that his work on weapon systems is secretive makes no sense anyway. He's trying to make a meal ticket out of being a whistleblower, and he's showing no respect for the law or government, so why is he suddenly so loyal to his previous employers? Anyway, let's take a look at some of Mark's commentary on technology and weapon systems, but before we tackle a few of Mark's clangers, I want to give a shout out in no particular order to 3 channels that you should watch if you want to understand Mark Steele's claims about streetlights and their antennas. These creators are Lee Porter, MC Toon, and Andrew McNeil, and they've uploaded some really high quality videos looking at Mark's specific claims about the equipment found in streetlights, and they've even shown in great details the inner workings of these devices that Mark says are so dangerous. Now, I'm not an expert in electronics or weapons systems. I've built a few model aircraft and some projects on Arduino boards, so I understand what some of the basic components are for, but look, I know more about biology and medicine, and that's why my videos focus on those subjects, but I do know enough to know that Mark Steele is simply full of rubbish. So let's start with this device that he's always waving around. It's Mark's EMF meter. He carries it religiously and it's like his magic wand, but does Mark understand how it works? No. Let's watch this typical clip of Mark demonstrating the fearful power of a 5G weapons installation.
Right, we'll just come and have a look at these this 5G weapon system. Alright, this is Benton. Alright, unfortunately, people out working their officers will die. Cat and dog shelter over there. You've got New Estate there. You've got these people here, all gonna die. This weapon, there's the 5G directional pans at the top, the radar underneath, 5G directional pans. Let's just have a look at the radiation levels here. Right, 5,000, see that? Maximum exposure to was 200. That's hitting 4,000, 3,000, 4,000, 3,000. So that's significantly higher. And that's on 24/7, 6,000. See it hit the 6,000 there? So that's on 24 hours a day. The ICNIRP guidelines only for 6 minutes. These people will die. There's no ifs, no buts. It's just a matter of when. That's the transmitter, and they haven't even turned them up. These are currently on 20%
right, are currently on 20% of the operating capability. So when you turn that up, see them big cooler boxes at the bottom? That's a weapon system there, you see that? It's even painted the right colour of a weapon.
So there are a few interesting things going on in this video. Firstly, Mark says that the radiation levels are 5,000, but he's not reading the number correctly. The number displayed on that screen is in volts per meter, and that's a decimal point, so that's 5 volts per meter. Later on, the display switches to millivolts per meter. Maybe that's what Mark was intending to read. And then he says that the maximum amount they can expose you to is 200, and that's only for 6 minutes, according to the ICNIRP guidelines. So let's go to the ICNIRP guidelines. Here's the passage that Mark is referring to. The first thing to point out here is that this 6 minutes that Mark is talking about here is an averaging interval. That means that you take a measurement, let's say every second for 6 minutes, and then you take an average. If that average is over 200, the limit has been exceeded. If the average is under 200, you can be exposed to that level of radiation indefinitely. There's no time limit, and the 6 minutes is just for the sake of the instrumental measurement. The second thing to point out here is the unit of measurement. The ICNIRP guidelines have set the safe absorbed power density at 200 watts per meter squared. Mark Steele has set his EMF device to volts per meter. Not only is this not the same unit, it's not even a measure of the same thing. One is measuring absorbed power density, and the other is a measure of electric field strength. To use an analogy, Mark hasn't just mistakenly set his kitchen scale in ounces instead of grams. At this point, he might as well be trying to add a mile of flour or 5 seconds of eggs to his cake instead of any particular unit of mass. Table 1 in this document is titled Quantities and Corresponding SI Units Used in These Guidelines. Volts per meter and watts per meter squared are both used, but the safety limit is defined in watts per meter squared. So every time that Mark reads off a number from his machine and says that it's over the ICNIRP guidelines, he's just talking rubbish. I don't know exactly what model of EMF measuring device Mark owns. I would suggest that he changes the settings or buys a model capable of measuring in watts per meter squared. To debunk Mark Steele, you don't need to know anything about electromagnetic radiation, you just need to be able to read. Mark has been waving around this EMF meter and yelling about the ICNIRP guidelines for years, and he hasn't understood how the meter works, and he doesn't understand the guidelines, and he's never listened to anyone who's tried to explain it to him, and they have tried.
This just shows how dumb you are, how thick you are. You've just shown me an antenna. It is not, the antenna you've shown me is not a high gain dielectric lens antenna.
Yes, all right.
The ones in my video are.
So can you let me talk?
You are.
Can you let me talk now?
Dummy.
You may.
All right. So the 6 minutes is an averaging of 6 minutes. That's not saying that you can only have 6 minutes a day. That means that you take the average of 6 minutes. So if you have 5 seconds of a higher power and 5 seconds of a lower power, you average them together over 6 minutes, and that's what the guideline is about. So then second, the high gain antenna that you speak of doesn't exist at least in any of the videos that you showed, because yours just has a wire that's on a circuit board.
No,
and that's
incorrect. You see, you're a liar, because anybody that looks at the videos that I did, that you broke down, they're a high gain dielectric lens antenna.
Where is the lens? Where's the lens?
The dielectric lens is printed on the end, you dummy.
No,
if you'd watched them,
yeah, but it needs to be bigger than the wavelength, Mark. It needs to be bigger than the wavelength. This is 1/4 of the wavelength. So a dielectric lens antenna at 868 megahertz needs to be significantly far away and much larger. So yours is just a little blip on the bottom of the circuit board. That's just the coating that goes on there. It's completely transparent to a radio frequency. So it's not a lens at all.
Stop moving about like that. I'm worried about what your boyfriend did to you last night, right? You're wriggling about on the seat, right? It's not making me feel comfortable at all.
Another one of Mark's more amusing claims is his supposed intelligence document showing that 50 million people will be killed in the UK by 2025. Here he is talking about it on video.
I have an intelligence document They're going to kill 55 million UK citizens by 2025. That includes you police officers.
So we've got a legal document. This is a bona fide organisation. We've had these documents for quite a while. You can actually go and have a look at the website. It's still there today. So this is the Deagle website. Let's just have a look at some of the population collapses. So here we have the United Kingdom. You'll see by 2025 population, it's less than 15 million. It's currently 66 million, you can see there. Now how they're going to kill 50 odd million people, 51 million. How they're going to do that?
So where does this claim come from? Well, it comes from Deagle.com, which is just a website that collates information on the number of attack aircraft, airliners and artillery pieces that each country has. Basically, everything published on Deagle.com is just a copy and paste from arms sales press releases. I think it might just be an automated process. It's also not all that accurate or comprehensive. They're completely missing the Sukhoi 17 family of fighter bombers that are still in service with a few countries, for example. So look, there's no reason to think of anything originating from Deagle.com as an intelligence document. This is just a content aggregating site on arms sales that lists some incomplete data on combat aircraft and has some weird population projections. Go check it out yourself. Can anyone tell me where Deagle got these numbers from? They certainly didn't post a source or calculation. But Mark is just really bad at research. Here he is talking about a paper on the supposed health effects of Wi-Fi.
So don't like this at all. Even the industry say it's not safe. Look, that's IEEE. See that there? It's industry. Biologically toxic. They don't like these videos because obviously you can go and you can just type that in and you can get the data for yourself to show that there's a crime being committed.
Oh, so we can just type that in. So let's do that. And what do we find? Ah, it's a retraction notice which the authors agreed to because of mistakes in their data analysis leading to false conclusions. I wonder how many of Mark's followers actually typed that in. But that's not Mark's worst mistake, not by a long shot. Perhaps most comically of all, Mark was recently fooled by a fake 5G dossier which he claims was leaked to him. Here he is talking about this on his Brighteon channel.
Good morning, guys. Obviously, I want people to see this. This is the engineering platform commands for the Weir technology. All right, this is from a very interesting source. You see, these people are heroes, standing up for what's right. All right. So anyway, I'm going to explain a few things to people.
But what do these long keys translate to? Well, they're all obscene messages about how gullible Mark Steele is. I can't take any credit for either perpetrating or revealing this hoax. There'll be some links in the description. I'm not sure if Mark's ever acknowledged this or explained how he got fooled. He usually just complains about paid trolls. Mark, people are trolling you because it's funny. They do it for free. Mark is remarkably useless at technology for a weapons systems expert as well. I've seen text messages between him and his followers where he says he doesn't know how to compress a video file. And in this clip where he wanted to add some music to a slideshow, he just played the song from his laptop and then opened each image one by one whilst recording it on his phone.
Alright, so here we go.
This kind of thing might be adorable for a grandma, but you'd expect a weapons systems expert to be computer literate. A few people have responded to Mark's teardowns of streetlight controllers, and even as a relative amateur, I can see Mark's talking rubbish when I watch these clips. He never seems to get past the 450 volt capacitors.
That's upside down, but that's a 3,300 watt relay. They're 450 volt capacitors, all right, on this delivery system. All right, there's obviously they're still not getting it. So the 450 volt capacitors are not interested. What they want to know is, right, how much I can make a fool of them. It's a radar piece of equipment. You can see that. This has got the 450 volt capacitor on it. And you see the cabling.
But voltage isn't a measure of power. A 450 volt capacitor is a common component anywhere that the mains runs at 240 volts. And just because something is high voltage doesn't make it particularly dangerous. Me and my brother used to shock each other with a 1000 volt insulation tester. It hurt, of course, but it's not dangerous because the current was very low. Watching Mark pull this apart is something like listening to a man try to explain the intricate workings of a machine gun made out of chocolate. You don't have to be a firearms expert to know that you can't build a machine gun out of confectionery, even if you don't know the bolt from the barrel. And neither can you build a directed energy weapon out of a piece of circuit board with a strip of copper on it. And as others have pointed out, to handle the kind of energy Mark's talking about here, you'd need a heatsink and you'd need some heavy duty wiring. And if this really was a directed energy weapon, it would need some way of focusing that energy. Again, I'll refer you to some other videos which really tackle the details on this, but I think people would benefit from just putting on their thinking caps before they swallow this crap from Mark. When I watch Mark Steele do these technical videos, I often just wonder, if you're such an expert, Mark, just plug the thing in and turn it on. Let's say you zap a rabbit with it or something. Anyone can pull things apart with a screwdriver and read the writings on the components, but he's never gone anywhere close to demonstrating his claims about its power or potential as a weapon.
Let's have a look at this bin. Look at that. Not a wasp. Not a wasp, not a fly. Nothing. All dead. All totally dead, right? See the transmitter on the top of there? That is an illegal, unlawful 5G telecoms array. Anybody that thinks that there's no birds, look, where's all the birds?
Hold on a minute, Mark. Why are you looking for birds on the floor? Let's rewind this clip. That's right, the birds are in the sky. Maybe take off your sunglasses and you might be able to see them. And let's watch this clip of Mark Steele, weapons systems expert, educating us on anti-radiation missiles.
You see those screens in the top of the helmet? They're there for a specific reason. It's to mitigate the battlefield interrogation equipment, what I call 5G, what is in fact 5G. Because what he can't do, he cannot fly into a battle scene without having his face and his head protected. If he did, there was microwave radiation weapon systems on a battlefield that posed to him a significant risk. So what he actually does, he goes in, uses these weapon sight systems to target up and use what's called arm missiles. We've all heard about arm missiles, anti-radiation missiles. You take the adversary's microwave radiation battlefield equipment out first because you cannot deploy men on the battlefield. That's how dangerous microwave radiation is.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Anti-radiation missiles are for attacking the radar systems of anti-aircraft batteries. Hate to play the weapons systems expert here, but it's not the radar that's especially dangerous here, either to the aviators or the ground troops. It's the anti-aircraft missile with an explosive warhead that the radar guides onto the target. Mark's just talking utter crap here. Anyone who knows even the slightest thing about air combat knows this. Probably the most famous example of anti-radiation missile-armed aircraft are the so-called wild weasels of the US Air Force. You can watch an interview with a former F-105 Thunder Chief pilot on Wings Over the Rockies channel where the pilot talks about launching one of these missiles. And this is how I know Mark Steele isn't a weapons systems expert. This is entry-level stuff. It's not classified. Mark isn't sharing some kind of privileged insight. He's just making stuff up in front of an audience who don't know any better. But let's skip on to the next slide he shows in this presentation.
Here's a bit of science, just to prove the point. We've got, these are LED street lights, these are human retinal cells in vitro, and as you'll see, this control 100%. So when you expose human retinal cells, you've got near 80% apoptosis, cell death. That's blue LED. That's what it does. It's retinal cell toxic, retinal cell toxic, full spectrum, near 60% cell death.
No, these are not human cells, these are mouse cells. It's an important distinction. And sure, if you expose a light-sensing cell to a constant source of bright light, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that this stimulation could cause it to enter programmed cell death. This would be analogous to turning off a broken pixel on a high-resolution display. But what happens when the cells are attached to an eyeball? Well, when faced with a bright light, you'd just look away, or perhaps you'd put on some sunglasses. Just because you can kill cells with blue LEDs in the lab doesn't mean that it's likely to happen in real life. And just to be clear, there's nothing spooky about LEDs in particular. They output light in a narrow frequency range, but the frequency spectrum of sunlight also peaks at around 450 nanometers. But yeah, I'm not going to go on at length here about Mark's insane beliefs. I'm pretty sure Mark peaked at what he now describes as the Battle of Trafalgar. But now all the buzz has died down, even some of his most enthusiastic supporters have started to call him out on his nonsense. There's even rumours that Garrett the Parrot is losing patience with Mark. If you go on Mark's social media these days, he's mostly just trying to convince people who know far better than him that this drip of coating on a circuit board is actually a lens of some description. If you didn't know better, you'd almost feel sorry for Mark being so far out of his depth. Mark also spends a lot of time bemoaning the trolls and the sheep for rating down his videos. He just can't seem to figure out that a lot of people genuinely don't like him. I have to say that I have mixed opinions about YouTube deleting Mark's previous channels, but now that it's happened, the result is at least kind of entertaining to watch. I wanted to end this video on a positive note about Mark, but I really don't have anything nice to say about him. He's a bully, he's a liar, and I'm not a prude when it comes to humour, but there's a persistent homophobic thread to Mark's insults that really leaves a sour taste in the mouth. If you ever watch Mark talk to his adversaries, he never, ever addresses the important points. He just screams genocide, talks over people, and insults them in a very crass way. So I've covered about as much as I can on Mark here, and I know I've missed a lot, but this video has gotten really long. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of links in the description as usual. And now I have some questions for my viewers. I recently watched an update from Potholer54, who said that he was considering monetizing his videos because he thought YouTube would share them more. Does anyone have any experience with this? Am I likely to get more views from monetized videos? Would the adverts bother my viewers? The other thing I've started considering more seriously is setting up a Patreon for this channel. I watch a lot of gaming content and I know people are willing to fund the YouTube channels that they like. I recently invested more money into equipment for this channel and I've even paid for some Facebook adverts recently. Now that I've uploaded nearly 40 videos over the last 2 or 3 years, I'm trying to think of ways that I can make this channel more viable in the long run. One thing I would like to do is maybe buy a proper camera or perhaps pay someone to make animations and maybe just recoup some of the money from my time invested. Honestly, it seems like people are going to accuse me of being paid off whether or not I actually get anything back from this channel, but again, let me know what you think. The other thing I've been thinking about is maybe trying something collaborative again. I know it's a great way to grow your audience. Does anyone want to work on something with me or know someone who might? Please let me know. And yeah, of course, like the video, subscribe to my channel. I really try to do this the fair way by leaving this channel crap right to the end. So if you like this approach, please reward it by actually clicking the buttons.